Alright guys, it's me, the Tycoon, coming back to you with another review. And this is of Who Killed WCW on Vice TV. And wow, what a series this was. It was only 4 episodes long as a documentary series. It is fascinating. And again, watching how Vice TV has taken on the pro wrestling industry, especially from the 80s and the 90s. The 90s scene of pro wrestling has revolutionized pro wrestling on TV and wherever you go watch it live. There's no denying it. The impact has been had because of what happened in WCW. It changed the game. Before that time, if you're like me who grew up on the world of sport in the UK, or you watched the golden era of the WWF with Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and Big Boss Man, so on and so forth, Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase, you know the characters that was there. But by the time it got around to the 1990s, um, the fandom was changing. Things were changing, and other things were taking place, like Japanese wrestling was coming to the forefront. New Japan Pro Wrestling, sorry, was coming in, and you start to see a slight change in the attitude of what people or more likely the appetite to what people want to consume when they were watching pro wrestling. They were pretty much becoming done with the same old formula: good guy, bad guy, referee looking over there, then head being twisted and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Everyone was getting, it had run its course, would be the best way of putting it. WCW changed that, and that's down to the minds of Eric Bischoff. Clearly, the NWO and all the tactics that Eric Bischoff had used to get himself ahead of the ratings that helped create the Attitude Era in response to the NWO and being 83 weeks winning the ratings race against the WWF at the time. Vince McMahon's baby. They were doing it, and they done it really well. If you was growing up in that era of WCW versus WWE or the Monday Night Wars, Attitude Era versus the NWO, so on and so forth, every week was different. Leading up to when the WCW Nitro overtook Monday Night Raw, that was a ride and a half because you didn't know who was coming from where. The first big episode of Nitro and the rebrand, you had Lex Luger, who had come back from the WWE or WWF at the time. And again, when you're looking at this, it's 4 episodes long as a documentary, and it really goes into the depths of WCW and how it went from a juggernaut, its rise to becoming a juggernaut. It became a juggernaut, and as quickly as it rose there, stayed there, and then crashed even harder to the point where it went bankrupt and had to be sold off. So who was responsible for that? So there's different players in this, and it's told from different perspectives, from the staff who worked on WCW, behind the scenes and in front of the camera, the rivals of WCW, because Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is actually the one who produced it. He's going to be saying this stuff. But then there's other players as well. Brad Siegel, who was working with Time Warner at the time, and Time Warner, AOL, that kind of thing. It's a very interesting concept what actually went on with him. You saw Stu Snyder, the guy who worked for the WWF at the time, that was also responsible for putting ahead the purchase. Vince Russo, and how in many ways he's looking at rose tinted glasses. He's looking through rose tinted glasses. And yes, he was the guy responsible for the Attitude Era in that sense that he was one of the main writers. But yeah, there's something wrong here. You could tell something was not quite right with Vince Russo. And again, you had so many other people and faces, the architects like Kevin Nash from the NWO, that kind of thing. and they all put their piece of history together. You got Goldberg. Goldberg was the big attraction at the time. He was the big draw. Same with Hogan, and you saw some of the missteps that took place. And a lot of it was, was it in Eric Bischoff's control? Because Eric Bischoff got them to the top. There's no two ways about it. Had it not been for Eric Bischoff, WCW would not be where it was. Vince McMahon would not have to update and do what he needed to do and change and bring it to a more realistic sense of view. Because that was going on at the time with WCW. It was realistic. It wasn't like, oh, right. Because if you come from like someone like myself, a martial arts background, and you saw some of the moves taking place, and you're thinking, why, they were wide open. They should have been knocked out. You saw that in Japanese wrestling. So, of course, you're watching in WCW now, and it's like, okay. You're now seeing guys like Chris Benoit, Ultimate Dragon, the Cruiserweights, so on and so forth. They're all having their shot and their shine. And that's part of the package. That was part of the appeal. Rey Mysterio Jr., being thrown against a wall by Kevin Nash. This thing never took place. And you saw the rise. You also see how they stayed there, what they done. But you also saw the appetite for WCW behind the scenes was not what they wanted on their portfolio. Ted Turner wanted it. Ted Turner definitely wanted it. But when it merged with AOL, the rest is history. You also had, like I said before, the powers that be were faceless. But they held ultimate power. They were telling Eric Bischoff what to do. And there was no one doing that with Vince McMahon. No one. So this is where quality control comes in. And the quality control has to happen from people who are actually within the industry, that love the industry. You saw that. And again, whether you like Eric Bischoff or hate him because he's not a wrestling guy, he didn't come up from the business, blah, blah, blah. It took his mind to get them to where they are. And, you actually, I'm going to say this. You actually feel that Eric Bischoff was hard done by everyone. He put in the hard work and the effort, and he got screwed over. But his legacy will continue forever and a day. Anyone who ever mentions WCW, and there's plenty of wrestling fans that will look back on WCW and say, okay, this was a great show to watch. It's all down to Eric Bischoff. All down to him. When Vince Russo came in, yes, the ratings went up slightly. But the reality was, he had tarnished the product. Because it may have went up slightly because people just wanted to see what he was going to do. This is the guy that brought about the Attitude Era. This is the guy. Let's see what he will do. And really what he done was rubbish. And it crashed it. And they couldn't recover. Even Brad Siegel, the guy who was the president at the time, behind the scenes, trying to get this thing going, he didn't really care. He didn't want to be a part of it. It was cash cow to him. So, but by working with Stu Snyder, and this is the conspiracy theory that was coming out, they, WWF, rather than spending $62 million on WCW, which was the going rate at the time, it went down to $4 million. I wonder why. So there does seem to be a conspiracy that lasts forever and a day. The Goldberg train, the NWO, all these things. It was just a cataclysm of things that went so beautifully well for that time when we loved pro wrestling. Such a great send-off. Eric Bischoff, you deserve your flowers, man. Right, so, as always, whatever platform you're watching this on, give me a like, give me a follow, give me a subscription. Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, if you don't know how to do that, then you don't need to go back to school. So says the TYCOON.